Okay, we're live with some more discussions on TroponinIQ. A little brightness here. Let me tone this down a bit. Okay, so we have some updates. So updates. We have the app now, and so if you've gone on TroponinIQ, you'll see the pop up notifying you to uh, add the app, which will add an icon to the home screen, and so you have all your chats will be saved for offline use if you ever want in the future. And then also it's just right there on the app. And then if you miss that pop up or remove it like everyone does, it's in your profile settings. There's an option to add the app also. So I thought today I would go through just some real quick prompts to show what it's capable of. On Professional Muscle, there was a big discussion on on like what it does and its value compared to things like Massive or Shredded, and it's hard to even market it because I can't explain how much value it has above those, because it has those uh, plus everything else I've ever written, every book I've ever written. It's got Massive, it's got Shredded, and not only that, you can ask it to rewrite Massive for you every day of the week, and it'll write a new plan for you. I saw a couple people comment that they were upset that they were using Massive and they asked it some questions and the questions didn't fit with what Massive suggested, or they weren't exactly the same macros or calories. When I was trying to explain is that that's the point. Massive is a single algorithm that takes your height, weight, and your estimated body fat percentage. No other data, no training history, no diet history, no information about what your actual body fat is, data to explain how close your estimation is to what it actually is, any of that. It's just that simple output, and it has to work for everyone from a 100-pound female to a 400-pound ex-offensive lineman. And it does well, but it's not going to be as exact as a fully customized program that I would write for you, which is what TroponinIQ does. So if it gives a different value than Massive, it's because it's giving a more accurate value that's not just a rough, loose estimated range based on a single algorithm for all people like Massive is. Now, Massive and Shredded are great, and I hope people keep buying them. People have been buying them for whatever reason at an accelerated rate since we launched TroponinIQ, but it will give you the full information of that. And that's nothing. That's just the base. The things you can ask beyond that are so much more advanced. But if you want to see, Massive is $100. TroponinIQ is $29.99 a month. So I'm going to see if I can share my screen here and run you through a prompt actually. And so hopefully you can see that. It's going to be a little small, but I'm going to actually say, I already got it copied and pasted. It's going to say, can you write me an off-season muscle growth diet plan that details specific meal timing and workout nutrition protocols, including food choices and supplement protocols, and listed in a spreadsheet format like an Excel spreadsheet. And so you'll see it thinking, or me thinking, and there you go. There's your diet plan, including supplementation, when to use ATP. It's got me using field rations during my workout. Uh, should have suppressor max in there. Maybe, I mean, it knows my data, and so maybe it thinks I don't need so. I mean, it knows my blood sugar is well regulated. So, and then from there, I could say, give me a list of food substitutes that also fit this diet. And there you go. It lists, food options. And this is just, like 10 seconds of prompting. You can see on here on the side, you can ask it essentially anything. Like I was interleukin 15. If anyone remembers that interleukin 15, it's a myokine essential is myokine, essentially a protein released by muscle cells during exercise. There was a period of time in the early mid 2000s where interleukin interleukin 15 was really looked at as a possible new drug to be used. I mean, I think people are looking at protease inhibitors. This was late in the growth hormone introduction phase, but early enough that most people hadn't tried it, and everyone was still kind of looking for the sodium grail as to what is possible. This is when myostatin inhibition was first kind of discussed and going through the research papers. So there's a lot of talk about interleukin 15. You can ask it about it, and it'll tell you everything I ever knew about interleukin 15 at the moment I knew it best. So better than I do currently. It knows it as well as I did when I was actively studying it, writing papers on it, looking for uses for it. The same with what's another one that this I stumbled on this. I forgot all about this, but at one point I found a biotin derivative, and there was a research paper done by a graduate student at LSU in 1999. I've lost the paper, but he showed it was something like chlorohydrobiotin, a biotin derivative that was shown to basically be like a proton uncoupler, like metabolic uncoupling, like DNP, acting through bound adipose tissue. And it was a really interesting paper. No, I don't think anything came of it because I couldn't find any follow-up research. It was his thesis. We actually contacted LSU, and Dante Trudell, in his infinite wisdom, contacted them, and somehow they started calling him Dr. Trudell and thinking he was a professor. And he actually got the only known sample of that biotin derivative that had been in ice. And I had that for a while. This is 15 years ago. We never came to anything, but you can ask it, what is acetyl CoA carboxylase and how does it affect fat burning? Is it showing my thing? Oh, wait. There we go. You can see it's an enzyme that essentially acts as a gatekeeper for fat burning in your mitochondria. Think of it as a traffic controller that either allow or block fatty acids from being used for energy. And then it shows how it works. It responds strongly to insulin levels. It's a really interesting, I guess, what would you call it? Not a compound, enzyme. Really interesting enzyme. But you can ask it, any question like that. And if anyone here in the chat has a question they want to see how TroponinIQ will answer it, I will. But you'll know that the thing that I've realized is difficult to market and maybe difficult to grasp is, why not ChatGTP? Well, ChatGTP is great for general answers. It knows something about everything. It has to, but it gives, it's a large language model. It's going to give the most probable answer for what it's found over the sum data of the internet based on prompt responses correlate, based on the wording related to the question you asked. And it's, so for simple things like how do I change a tire? What does a battery in my car look like? How do I change the alternator? It's going to nail it. But if you ask it to write, if you ask it about interleukin 15, actually it probably would because that's a general scientific. But you asked it to, what should I do with sodium the final 36 hours of a bodybuilding peak week, and expect that it knows everything about your past history, it's going to give who knows what answer. And it's going to be different every time. And I've played with this, and sometimes it says cut sodium. Sometimes it gives a sodium amount that's actually, too low or just strange. Where if you ask TroponinIQ, it will give an answer as I would, as an expert would. And that's where AI is going to really shine early on, is once we get, complete general intelligence, AGI, that it's going to, it's going to know what I know, because it's going to know what everyone knows. It's going to be amazing. But I don't know who knows if we'll get there. And if we will, it's not current, and it's not probably that close. It's at least several years off. So until then, what it can do is give that level of full intelligent responses in specific areas when it's trained specifically on the knowledge base of experts in that area, which is what we did. We've trained it for months on everything I've ever put out, every book, every training program. So Massive's in there, Shredded's in there, Comprehensive Performance Nutrition's are in there. So you can get the full, $500 body of all my published books for $30. And it has all that information, plus everything I've not published. A Comprehensive Performance Nutrition 3 that's yet unpublished. All that data is in there. I've even noticed in some of the responses, in one response that someone posted on Professional Muscle, where there's a good discussion about TroponinIQ, someone posted something, and in there it said something about, speaking as me, which it does. It says in working with 100,000 people or 100,000 diets. And I thought, okay, that's, I haven't worked with 100,000 people. That's a major exaggeration. I've worked with 1,000, I'm sure, or more. But then I started thinking, you know, it's trained on everything. I'm sure I've sent over 100,000 diets. Every client gets, in contest, typically almost every single week they get a new diet. So each client can get as much as, 30 diets over the course of a year, maybe even more. And so when you take every client I've had for 25 years and all their diets, it has seen 100,000 clients. It's going to view each diet as a separate diet. And that's how deep it knows everything. And even better, it learns you. If I go to my profile here, this is important because it only knows what you give it. And so we have a profile section here. In the current diet, areas like that where you can give more detail, the more detail you give, the better in your goals, because this data all stays in your IQ. That is permanent. The chats, I just asked it this data. The chats, it will remember everything in chat. And so you can stay in this chat and it will remember that. But once you start a new chat, it's not going to remember everything it did for you in the previous chat. Maybe someday we can get there, but the storage just grows exponentially, and it's not cheap. All this stuff, data costs money, storage costs money, processing power costs money, and so the only thing we keep permanently stored is going to be your profile data. But you can also go back through, and if you were like, oh crap, I had a really good chat, we were talking for 2 hours, I learned a ton of stuff, that gave me all this information about contest prep, what compounds to use, I told it what gear I responded to, it told me how it would adjust my PED cycles, all these things, and I forgot to enter that into my profile to make it permanent. You can reopen that chat and go back through, and it will essentially relearn instantaneous as you go back through the chat, and then work from that knowledge base. But your permanent knowledge is going to be stored here in the profile. I can't stress enough to keep this up to date and include as much information as you can. You can see here I'm pretty small now. The more you give there, the better it's going to give answers. And then the more you work with it long term, the better answers it's going to give, just as a coach would. I had a client, say that, they asked TroponinIQ its response to a question they had asked me that same day, where I gave an answer about talking to a specific person. Obviously it can't know conversations you and I have offline at this moment because it's not entered into the IQ. But if you give it that information, it will know it. But you got to remember, this is pulling from my full knowledge base. Obviously we've fed it over 100,000 diets. I think there was like 11,000 individual questions and answers. I've been saving this stuff for years. I had something like 700,000 files when I just did a file count. I don't know how many of them were temp files or, wasted or deprecated files, but there was something like 700,000 files in the various hard drives that I had saved. And that's independent of all the podcasts, live streams, videos, published articles, blogs, and all those things, which were also trained, that are available online. But it's very well trained. It's getting better. It's getting better very quickly right now, as it's getting a ton of user prompts and user feedback, and we're getting more information. And we're coming out with a new releases and new content all the time. We did the app. We upgraded the profile. We're working. One thing that's been confusing people is something I really wanted is I hate logging in everywhere you go, and you got to go through two-factor authentication. You got to remember a password that you forget. And when you change your password and go to type in your password, it says you can't reuse your old password. And so we use a magic link that's independent of passwords. It will recall, just like a passkey works on your phone or computer, or the way you can just log into your Google account by clicking a button. We work through a passkey system. So it's incredibly convenient. You upload the app, follow the instructions, upload it, get it on your home screen. Then every time you open it, you don't have to log in. It knows you're on your phone, and or it'll know you're in your computer based on whether you're logged into Apple or Google or whatever passkey situation, where it's got the key to know that is you logged in there. So it's very convenient in that aspect, in that you don't have to remember a password. You can log in as long as you're as long as you're logged in something that knows it's you and it's verified all those processes, any pass key is going to work. And really, even saying this is pointless because you don't have to do anything. You just sign up and it automatically does all things and it knows those things. And every time you log on, it will work. It works a little too well because sometimes I like to uh, keep some of these available where I'm not logged in because I want to see how it gives fresh responses when it doesn't know someone's data. And it's difficult because all it takes is one time in a new browser before it knows it's me, and then I'm logged in. But it's if anyone's got any, I was trying to keep it short here. I just wanted to announce the app release. Announce that we're training it heavily right now on the algorithms and massive and shredded to get it more precise there. We'll be working on it'll give a peak week now. It's not very good because it hasn't been trained specifically. It's just trained on all the information I've given over the years on the internet, on podcasts to clients about peak week. So it'll give a response. And I did one. Let me see if I have one up here. Peak week. Yeah. So right here, if you can see this, not much bigger, but peak week protocol, it shows the carbs go down and then it has me carbing up 2 days on 1,000 grams and a day here on 300 grams. That's lower than I would like, but this is all self-directed. It was not trained specifically on that. Another one I noticed on Professional Muscle is it gave a check-in checklist basically for a person, and it was really interesting because it was not trained for that. There was no code anywhere that says this is how Justin wants a check-in, but it knew what to say because it knows how I like check-ins because it's me. And so we're really seeing how that's kind of blossoming and growing, and it's getting better as we get more users, and it just really refines its knowledge base. And then now, as we get more users, more data, we're finding more edge cases. We can really lock in the training from here to get better and better. And I don't think it's going to be very long at all. I don't want to say a time, but within the next 12 months, I think for sure. I mean, I really do. I almost want to say this year. I think we'll have it where you can upload your photos. It'll analyze your photos and change your diet based on that, change your training based on that, change your supplements, change your PEDs based on that, and then also track those progress pics. And so in my mind, what I'm kind of hoping for is down the road for as far as the research capabilities of this. Now, it won't know you, it won't know a person, it won't be able to do this for a person, but all this data will exist. And so I'll be able to go back and recall, say, a couple of years from now, and I'll say, we always eat a lot of protein and everyone always talks about how much is too much protein. What's the right amount of protein? Is there a clear correlation between, protein intake and muscle growth? And so I can say it'll know what users have done. Have they this much grams of protein per pound of body weight, this much that month? And I can say, TroponinIQ plot the rates of growth for users who have eaten at least 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight for the last 2 years versus 1 gram per kilogram, 1 gram of lean body mass, 2 grams of body weight, 3 grams of body weight, 600 grams of protein, whatever we could find, wherever the limits are. And we can see that. We'll be able to plot that and see what rates of growth. What I would expect is there's probably going to be a fairly linear correlation with increased protein intake and more rapid rates of growth. And then I think it's going to level off, or we're going to find out that at a certain point, adding more protein doesn't appear to accelerate muscle growth any more than a certain point. Then we can go back again and say, of the people who are eating at this max level of protein intake for the last 2 years, then plot how they grew if they stuck to a moderate carb, moderate fat approach in correlation with that, high carb, low fat, carb cycling. And then also we can say, show me the change in body composition for people who used a contest prep protocol from you that focused on carb cycling versus a contest prep protocol from you that focused on keto or carnivore or low carb or isocaloric, hypocaloric, like iso, but the same deficit every day of the week. And say, so we can say, given that for a total weekly calorie intake, users who cycled their carbs according to these methods, their body composition changed this way over a 16-week contest prep versus people who just ate a single calorie deficit of 500 calories a day or whatever. and get real answers for these questions that we have no answers on, and you can't get them because you can't follow you can't follow 10,000 people for 3 months, track everything they eat, and trust that they're going to do everything. These things aren't really trackable. Same thing with progressive overload. We'll be able to say, plot the body composition of changes or rates of muscle growth from users who primarily utilize progressive overload training versus volume or bro split or whatever you want to do. We'll have all this information, and so as the data accumulates, it's going to be remarkably effective in guiding the future progress of the sport. And that's just a side benefit, that we're all going to get, because in the process, you're going to get essentially working with a top coach for pennies a day. A coach is very expensive. You can work with me directly, and I will continue to coach. And I'm not using this in my coaching. It's not to that level yet. And even if it was to that level, I will always keep my coaching separate. I'm hoping this allows me to really focus on my coaching a little more and devote more time each day to it and really lock in, which will then also in turn improve this, as this is fed more data down the road from the new things I learned by really, increasing my time spent, whatever. But it's all this data is going to be there. It's already at the level of, if you like massive, if you like shredded, if you like comprehensive performance nutrition, it already has that information, and that is a tiny. It's hard to even market it because I can't even explain. That's such a tiny subset of what it has. That's 0.001% of what this has. People happily pay $100 for massive or shredded all day, every day, where you can get that plus 100,000 times more information than that for less than a third of the cost of one of those books. And it'll improve over time. And as we see more edge cases, we'll refine some of the prompt responses. But I saw in Professional Muscle, someone said something about they didn't want to be part of beta testing. That's not the level we're at. We've been feeding this data for months. This has been part of the Generation Iron documentary. We touched on it briefly throughout that, so you can kind of see the growth and development with our development team from that. We went through, like, friends and family stress testing, months ago. Maybe 3 months ago, we started giving it to clients of mine to give them a month of use and ask them to stress test it, really try to find where it fails. And so we're through all that. And that's where the point we're at now, where it's not, we're obviously not beta. We're at the point where the only way we can expand it further is to get massive user base, massive data chunks, massive prompt chunks. And we're getting that as people are using it. And some people really are. I mean, some people, I think, this is last week even, I think we had people who were over 100 hours of use time, and within the first 3 weeks of launch. So whoever those people are, they're getting value from it, and they're learning the value from it. And that's sort of the difficult part, is it's not spoon fed for you. You need to ask the questions, but it will give an answer. So it's kind of like, we're moving from the days of 3 channels with an antenna, and you'd have tinfoil on it trying to get CBS News, to when your family got cable TV and you had 30 channels and then 100 channels. And then the big leap to streaming, where it's almost unlimited content. But the problem is, it's not a TV guide list of, this show's on at this time. You have to ask for the movie or the documentary, but they're all there. And so really the only limitation at this point is your imagination, what you're able to ask it. And that what the cool thing is, that we're testing everyone's limitation with that, which is going to, the more users we get, really iron out the edge cases. Because you always find this in anything you do. You think you covered everything you could think of, everyone could think of, and the second a new user gets on, they ask a question that you hadn't thought to ask. Which is really interesting, because you'll see, like in some of the early stress testing, someone would ask a question, you think, oh crap, it'll have no idea how to answer that, but it does. You could see it like learning, and it's so like crazy, because it's like, wow, this was never trained specifically on that question. There's nothing in the code base that includes those words in that order on that topic, but it, because of the way large language models work and the fact that we fed it a lot of data at this point, and it's growing exponentially because of the user base, it knew how to answer it. It's like, I knew how to do the peak week, knew for check-ins what I would like, So it's remarkable. It's like it's hard to market because the price is criminally low. You know, you know, you work with a coach, you're spending upwards of $500 a month. You buy, you know, a detailed training program, you might spend $100. You buy a detailed diet spreadsheet, might another $100. You buy a couple, you know, nutrition books or education books, or join an education course, another $20, $30, maybe $20 a month. This has all of that all at once and under $30 per month, less than a dollar per day. You know, and the benefit to me with that is that, you know, the more users we get, the more data we get, and then the faster and more, you know, accurately and effectively we can grow this and get to what my ultimate goal is, what I talked about at the start of this, which is that the research data, the things we can't currently answer that are always hot topics: protein intake, types of dieting, carb cycling, keto, you know, uh, Atkins or carnivore or the zone, or any of these training programs, progressive overload, push pull legs, bro split. You know, do orals improve growth, or do they just bloat you? Do, you know, what types of cycles work better? And with that, what's really interesting is right now we have no idea as far as PEDs what people are really using. We know what people say they use. We know what coaches are recommending, you know, but these aren't, you're not, you, there's no, like, it doesn't, the pill doesn't pass through or the injection doesn't pass through a counter to know exactly what someone has used. And so we don't really know. This will learn that because it will, you know, you'll input what your cycle is. And if you want accurate results, because no one's going to see these and there's nothing to correlate you with the data. You know, you're just a data point yourself of, you know, of x's, of zeros and ones. It doesn't know who you are, what you are, but it knows that you're linked to these data points, which a computer will later be able to utilize. But you know, you tell it what it's using, and it's going to recommend a PD protocol. And then when it sees that it's recommending something completely different than all the average user base is already using, it's going to know that what it was trained to recommend by me is not actually what people are using. You know, and maybe I recommend too low compared to what people are actually using. Maybe I recommend too high, but we'll know that, and it will learn and change its responses based on what people are actually using. So the first time ever, we're going to be able to know essentially what people are actually using based on the responses TroponinIQ will eventually give on recommendations, giving your, you know, height, weight, training, years training, competitive history, any data you can give it, it will correlate it with that and, you know, increase the precision. And so I'm curious to see what we get with that. I mean, I don't think there's that much mystery. I know there's not a mystery, and I know what people are using, but I think for the public at large, and you know, the people that, you know, the pros use 20 grams a week, or you know, X XY former pro comes on and says they never did more than, you know, 2 cc's a decade. You know, some of the crazy things you see. We'll have actual data when we're not relying on someone to give truthful advice on how much of a legal substance and an illegal substance they're using. We will know that data, and so the PED protocols are going to be outrageously accurate down the road with that data. The diets are going to be outrageously accurate. At some point, what, you know, at some point this app will also, maybe, you know, maybe we'll have AGI, maybe all the AIs will be able to do it, but at some point this is going to be able to give you a better response than an actual coach would over over a long period of time. We're nowhere near there. And it's not going to get there anytime soon, you know, soon as in the next year or two, but it will at some point. You know, progress always happens. You know, was it like Jeff Goldblum? You know, life finds a way. So, so those are some of the things I'm excited about. Let me see. We got a bunch of questions or comments. Let me see if there's any ones in here to use. I asked Troponin IQ about pumping up before stage. It was never trained on that. I don't even know if I've ever. I'm sure I've talked about that at some point on a podcast. I'll ask it. All right, let me bring you to the screen again. Yeah, 45 minutes out, begin pump up. It's, I mean, maybe a little late, but I don't like to rush it. You know, people get worried about losing their pump or not, or pumping up too much or not enough. You know, you're dehydrated, and the pump is largely correlated to water volume. So you're not going to get a pump like you would in the gym in the off season. But all prep, you get a pump and you're in the gym for 60 minutes, 90 minutes, training very hard, until as intense as possible. And you're able to hold a pump for 60 minutes. So you don't have to be so concerned about, oh no, I pumped up for 20 minutes, I'm going to flatten out on stage. You actually want to get a decent pump, in my idea. So I think I usually recommend 30 to 45. So it says that for the begin pump up. Final carb load, I'm assuming it's gonna talk about, maybe because I usually recommend like a high sodium carb source if we need to spike blood sodium, and there's ways you can tell that. I don't know if the IQ will know it yet. It would if I've talked about it at some point. I think I'm sure it probably will. Maybe I'll ask it. Or sometimes we'll do a sugary carb source, or sometimes even a liquid carb source. And then 5 minutes out, final pump maintenance. Yeah, resistance band, light dumbbells. Yeah, electrolyte. I mean, yeah, it's pretty darn close. Especially given that there's no one pump up pro. That's the other thing. There's no one pump up protocol. It's going to be slightly different for everyone, which is what you'll get from this also. That's what it's recommending for me. It knows my data. It knows my competitive history. It knows I competed at the national stage. I competed in powerlifting. It knows I played, you know, uh, football. It knows I played, baseball when I was younger, wrestling. And it knows my height, weight, body, fat, all those things. So it might give different answers to you. It probably will. But yeah, it'll answer essentially anything. Let's see this one. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it will. What it's going to know is that you've been asking it, each week, or you can ask every day. You could ask it every hour. But let's say you're doing check-ins every week, and you're asking it questions, on your prep, and it's giving you diets, and you're following that diet, and it's making adjustments on that. If it's lowered calories by, uh, 500 calories per day on average from the previous diet, and it's maybe added some fat burners in, and you suddenly drop, 7 pounds of body weight, and you self-report feeling flat. When we have the photo analysis, you look flat. Yeah, it'll know those things, and it will adjust. I mean, this is, it's like anytime there's new computer technology, we're always, we always like don't want to believe it, or want to do the, stick with the real thing. But it's funny to me because computers always win in the end. They just do. It's like Dojo, which isn't even being used anymore. Isn't even That whole program is being dropped because it's no longer going to be worth it. Was it like a petaflop of 10 to 18 processes per second? Now, I don't even know if humans as an entire species have done 10 to the 18 calculations in human existence, to do that per second, and then have that not even be the type of chip that's most effective for processing right now. Nvidia's, I don't even know what they're doing, and I'm not a computer guy as far as those things, so I might even be saying words wrong. But well, an example I always think of is, one of my favorite books is called "Surely You're Joking, Mr. Feynman," and it's about Richard Feynman, who's one of my favorite physicists, won the Nobel Prize for quantum electrodynamics, invented Feynman diagrams, and the story behind that is really awesome, also. But he talks about, when they were working on in Los Alamos on the or New Mexico on the atomic bomb project, when mechanical calculators were first coming out, and he talks about how this big calculator would come on site, and they would ask it to do these calculations, and they checked it every time by hand to see if the calculator got it correct. Because it was a new computing technology, and that's how people are. They don't believe it. It's funny now when you think about it, because any one of us, can you imagine being on an exam in high school doing a multiplication problem or whatever, and your calculator gives an answer, and you're going through and doing long division to verify that the calculator is correct? No, because the calculator is better and faster and more accurate than you are. Just like transmissions and cars. I remember being a kid, and all the gearheads would, I ain't never using an automatic shifter. My race car's shifted by hand, and it's, yeah, great, but a computer's faster than you. They always are. Now, and even if you do shift by hand, you're doing sequential stuff, and this is no different. It's going to be better than us. It's going to know, because for the simple matter of, the more theoretically, I can feed it every bit of information I know, or ever knew about fitness, and it will know it. And not only will it know it and store it, but it will always know it as well as I knew it at the moment I felt I knew it well enough to write it into an article, put it in a book, or talk about it online. so many of these things like interleukin 15, forgot that existed, or acetylcoenzyme A carboxylase 2. I remember that existed, and I could probably pull that data if you ask me some questions and kind of work through it. But this knows it as well as I knew it at the moment. I felt I knew it well enough to write an article about it, and it knows it at that level forever. Uh, Force fats. I mean, well, I mean, no, I never force anything. Well, that's why you work with someone, is because if they're good, they'll be able to work with whatever your specific situations are. Fats are interesting in that there is kind of a minimum. There's a reason things are called essential fatty acids. It's because if you don't get those fatty acids for a long enough period of time, you no longer, it's essential you have them. You no longer exist without them. Bad things happen. You can't live forever without essential fatty acids, just like you can't live forever without essential amino acids. So there's some fat intake that's required, although it's quite low. And I have clients on all. I don't know if I saw him on here. He's on here sometimes. Jake, what's up, Dean? Jacob Apple is we found, because of his GI issues, that he tolerates very high fats in the off season. Other people, maybe they had the gallbladder removed, and we have to be very careful with fats. So yeah, will adjust it. I mean, that's what a coach should do. The reason you work with the coach is they have this whole body of knowledge, for one, on all these topics. And then two, then the next good thing is you want someone who's got experience. So they've got this body of knowledge and they've applied it many times. And then three, you want the results. They've applied it many times and it's worked to turn this person pro, win this pro show, have this person make weight for an MMA fight, or win this powerlifting title. And those are the three things you look for. And so, if you're ever with a coach who, I hate, my biggest pet peeve in the bodybuilding industry is trust the process. If you're with a coach who you ask a question and they tell you to just trust the process, that's, to me, there's no worse thing, because A, that means there is no process, because if there is one, they would tell you, or B, they don't know the process themselves, which is much more likely, and they're just repeating what they were taught by someone else, and they have no idea if it's actually working for you or will work for you. They just hope it does, and they tell you to trust that it will. But a good coach should never, you shouldn't trust the process. You should be explain the process so you understand it. And going back to TroponinIQ, even that's what this does, but even better, you can sit there and ask it every question you could ever think of about the process 24 hours a day, and it doesn't get tired, it doesn't get winded, it doesn't get sick of answering questions, it doesn't get sick of typing. And so, it's like a coach on steroids. Let me see if we got anything else. I'll wrap it up here. It was way longer than I wanted to do, but I think we covered some good things. Yeah, that's about it for comments. But I'll try to keep doing these about once a week. I'm meeting with our developers tomorrow about some new updates that they're very excited about, and so I almost delayed this until then. I might do another one once I find out what. I think there's a couple things we've been working on that I'm gonna hopefully assume we've been able to crack that we were struggling with, and if that's the case, the next set of updates are really going to be interesting in the way it integrates everything. But I don't want to, we haven't met with them yet, but hopefully I'll be able to do this again, maybe later this week, or if it's not, then in next week's live stream, and announce that next round of releases. And that's what we hope to do. We hope to be a very active AI company, very active with releases, you know, putting everything I have into this right now financially, as far as real. I just from someone who grew up loving science and so the reason my degree is in exercise and health science is because as a dumb 18-year-old kid going to college, I met with my advisor. I didn't know what I wanted to be, of course, and they kind of ask you what you want to do or what you like, and I basically said, well, I like working out, sports, and science. And so they're like, well, that's perfect, we have exercise science. And I thought, well, that's great, sports and science is what I love. And so I've kind of always really wanted to kind of tie those things together. Coaching does it a little bit, uh, but it's not, I'm making a difference in a person's life, which is awesome, because that's really the deepest difference you can make. But I'm not making a huge difference to the public, to the body of work of, the fitness industry. The supplements help me do that a little bit. And then I'm able to produce supplements that I believe in and use. And then if you notice, we've been working hard to get the cost down on products. Every time we improve our manufacturing, I basically pump that that improvement right on the customers. We've lowered suppressor max, we lowered field rations, working on QRF and renal reset lower, WTF. And but again, it's not, it's scientific, but it's not that where this is really, I feel like, my chance to kind of really contribute to the body of knowledge and the scientific aspect of the fitness community in a way I wouldn't be able to otherwise. And it's going to be with things like the data points and the answers to questions we can't answer, like what happens to a large group of people who eat this various amounts of protein, who grows the best, what training program is producing the best results, is carb cycling the best fat loss protocol, is carb cycling the best off-season protocol. And soon we'll have all those. And the more users we get, and the more data points and the more prompts we get, the better we'll be able to answer those. And that's what I'm most excited about. So that's it. I'm going to go offline. I'll see you guys next week.